Every monument hides a story. Every stone whispers a past. Welcome to History Vault, where history comes alive. Imagine standing at the edge of a rocky shore, where the cold Atlantic waves crash relentlessly and the wind carries whispers of centuries past. Here, in the year 1620, weary travelers stepped onto the unknown, leaving behind everything familiar in search of freedom and a new life. This is Plymouth, Massachusetts, a place where courage met uncertainty, where legends were born, and where a simple stone became the silent witness to one of history's most enduring journeys. Welcome to the story of Plymouth Rock, a symbol that has captured the imagination of the world for over 400 years. The story begins in the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic, in the year 1620. A wooden ship, the Mayflower, battered by storms and relentless waves, slowly approached the rocky shores of what we now know as Plymouth, Massachusetts. On board were 102 weary souls, men, women, and children, seeking a life that had been denied to them in the rigid confines of England. They were Puritans, determined to escape religious persecution, carry with them only their meager belongings, faith, and an unshakable hope for a new beginning. The ocean was unforgiving, its depths hiding secrets and dangers unknown. Yet the Pilgrims pressed on, guided by a mixture of determination and divine providence, unaware that history itself was watching their every move. As dawn broke over the horizon, the silhouette of land emerged, a jagged coastline that would forever be etched in the story of America. The Pilgrims, eyes squinting against the early morning sun, saw in that rocky shore a promise of freedom, a place to plant roots that could grow into something enduring. The landing was not just a physical step onto solid ground. It was a leap into an uncertain future. Many wondered whether this distant, cold land could ever sustain them, whether the harsh winters and unfamiliar terrain would become allies or enemies. Yet, in their hearts, there was a silent determination, a quiet belief that this was the place destiny had chosen for them. Legend has it that when the Pilgrims finally stepped from the Mayflower, they touched a large, unassuming rock, a boulder that would later become immortalized as Plymouth Rock. It is said to be the exact point where the Pilgrims set foot on American soil. Yet, the mystery of that moment lingers. There is no definitive record that confirms the rock as their first touch, and some historians argue it was later designated as a symbol to honor the landing. Nevertheless, the image of weary pilgrims placing their feet on a solitary rock, staring out at the vast, unknown wilderness, captures the imagination like nothing else. It is a moment suspended between myth and reality, where history and legend merge to tell a story of courage and audacity. The arrival of the Mayflower did not unfold as a triumphal event. The Pilgrims faced immediate challenges. The land was unfamiliar and forbidding, covered with dense forests and marshes, dotted with rivers and hidden dangers. Supplies were limited, and the threat of disease loomed over the settlement. Many of these settlers were farmers and craftsmen, unaccustomed to the harsh, icy winters of New England. They had left everything behind, their homes, their families, and the familiar world of Europe, embarking on a journey into the unknown. And yet, amid this uncertainty, there was a resilience, a collective will that bound them together. They were not merely surviving. They were laying the foundation for a community that would endure centuries. The Pilgrims' journey was also marked by subtle, almost mystical moments. Some accounts speak of strange weather patterns, sudden calm seas, or fortuitous sightings that guided them toward their destination. To the Pilgrims, these occurrences were signs, divine nudges that their perilous voyage had meaning beyond immediate struggle. Each wave that threatened to capsize the Mayflower seemed to whisper a test of faith, each gust of wind a challenge to their resolve. As they finally set foot on the soil of Plymouth, it was as if the land itself was waiting for them, a silent witness to history in the making. Stepping ashore, the Pilgrims faced a land that had been inhabited for generations by the Wampanoag people. They would later learn to rely on the knowledge and guidance of this indigenous tribe to survive. But in those first moments, the wilderness seemed both a threat and a promise. The forests whispered secrets. The rivers gleamed with hidden currents, and the rocky coast seemed to stand as a guardian of some ancient mystery. To the Pilgrims, every tree and stone held the possibility of discovery or disaster. Yet, in that tension between danger and opportunity, the human spirit revealed its extraordinary capacity for hope and imagination. And so, the landing at Plymouth was more than a simple arrival. It was a crucible, a point in history where ordinary people confronted the extraordinary. The Pilgrims' footsteps on the shore were tentative yet resolute, a mixture of fear and anticipation, of human frailty and boundless courage. They planted the seeds of a new society in the soil of uncertainty, not knowing whether the future would be kind or cruel, but certain that they were part of a story far greater than themselves. The echoes of that landing still reverberate through time, inviting every observer to ponder the mysteries of courage, faith, and the unknown. Plymouth Rock, weathered by centuries and waves, remains a silent witness to that first contact with history, a symbol of daring, determination, and the timeless allure of the unknown. Every crack in its surface, every curve worn smooth by hands over the years, holds away a moment that forever changed the course of a continent. And as we imagine those first pilgrims stepping onto that shore, we are reminded that history is not just about dates and events. It is about human stories, bravery, and the endless dance between destiny and discovery. Plymouth Rock stands today as one of the most enduring symbols of early American history, yet its story is shrouded in mystery and legend. The rock itself is modest in size, unremarkable at first glance, a simple slab of gray stone lying near the waterfront in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And yet, this unassuming boulder has become an icon, a silent witness to a moment that has captivated imaginations for centuries. It is said to mark the very spot where the Pilgrims first set foot on the shores of the New World in 1620, but the truth is far more elusive. Historians have debated its authenticity for generations. No contemporary accounts from the Pilgrims themselves mention a rock, and the earliest written references appear more than a century after the landing. And yet, the legend persisted, a testament to humanity's need for tangible symbols of history. The story begins in the 18th century, when Plymouth residents began identifying a specific rock as the legendary landing site. In 1741, a man named Thomas Founds claimed that his ancestors had carried the tradition of the Pilgrims' first step onto that very stone. Over time, this tradition gained acceptance, and Plymouth Rock became enshrined in public imagination as a sacred relic of America's beginnings. To the people of the era, the rock represented more than mere stone. It was a link to courage, faith, and the unyielding human desire to build something new out of uncertainty. Even as its authenticity remained uncertain, Plymouth Rock became a focal point for national identity, a physical embodiment of the ideals that the Pilgrims supposedly carried with them across the Atlantic. The mystery of Plymouth Rock deepens when one considers the stone itself. Over the centuries, it has been moved, split, and even partially chipped away, yet it has survived. In 1774, it was pried from its original location and transported to the center of Plymouth town, a symbolic gesture meant to honor its significance. Later, in 1834, the rock was split in half during an attempt to move it to a more prominent location, and only one portion remains at the waterfront today. These acts of human intervention, while intended to preserve the legend, add layers of intrigue. Each crack and fracture in a rock seems almost like a map of history itself, etched by both time and human hands, carried with its centuries of devotion, controversy, and interpretation. What makes Plymouth Rock truly compelling, however, is not its size or appearance, but the story it tells about memory and myth. The Pilgrims' landing was a real historical event, yet the precise details are veiled in uncertainty. In the absence of concrete evidence, the imagination steps in, transforming a simple rock into a symbol of destiny and divine guidance. For centuries, visitors have gazed upon the stone, contemplating the courage it represents and the mystery it embodies. The rock invites reflection not only on the Pilgrim's journey, but also on the ways in which human beings create meaning from fragments of the past. It is a reminder that history is often as much about stories and symbolism as it is about facts. As tourists gather around Plymouth Rock today, one can almost sense the whispers of the past. Imagine the weary pilgrims, carrying children and possessions across a jagged coastline, searching for solid ground. Though there may be no record of them stepping upon this very stone, the rock serves as a touchstone, a point of connection between modern visitors and the distant, unknown world the Pilgrims faced. There is an almost mystical quality in imagining that beneath our feet lies the echo of a first step, the faint imprint of human hope and courage. It is a place where history and legend intertwine so completely that separating fact from fiction becomes almost impossible, and perhaps unnecessary. The legend of Plymouth Rock also reflects the broader human fascination with objects as vessels of memory. Societies throughout history have sought physical reminders of defining moments, artifacts that anchor collective identity and cultural heritage. Plymouth Rock functions in exactly this way. Its rough, weathered surface has become a canvas onto which generations have projected ideas of bravery, resilience, and the founding ideals of America. Children touch it, scholars debate it, and tourists photograph it, each interaction reinforcing its symbolic power. Even as historians question its authenticity, the rock's meaning continues to grow, fueled by imagination and reverence rather than documentation alone. And there is a subtle, almost haunting quality to the rock's presence on the Plymouth waterfront. The salt air, the waves lapping at its base, and the changing light of dawn and dusk create a dynamic, living monument. Every shadow that falls across its surface tells a story. Every visitor who stands before it participates in a centuries-long dialogue between past and present. The rock is both ordinary and extraordinary, mundane and sacred, a paradox that captures the essence of history itself. It asks us to consider not only what actually happened, but also how we remember, interpret, and honor those moments that shape our identity as a people. Ultimately, Plymouth Rock is more than a landmark. It is a symbol of the mysteries that history carries with it. It represents the unknown courage of the Pilgrims, the passage of time, and the human need to connect with a story larger than ourselves. Its legend endures not because it can be proven beyond doubt, but because it resonates with something deep within us. The desire to touch the past, to feel the weight of those who came before, and to imagine what it must have been like to step into the unknown, guided only by faith, hope, and the relentless pursuit of a new life. In that sense, the rock is eternal, a stone that invites reflection, evokes wonder, and reminds us that history is always, in part, a mystery waiting to be explored. When the Pilgrims first set foot on the rugged shores of Plymouth, they were stepping into a world already inhabited, a land rich with life, culture, and mystery. The Wampanoag people had lived there for generations, their villages tucked between forests and rivers, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of the seasons. To the Pilgrims, this land must have seemed both inviting and intimidating, its beauty shadowed by the uncertainty of the unknown. They had crossed an ocean in search of freedom, but survival depended not only on courage and faith. They needed knowledge, guidance, and the subtle diplomacy that could only come from those who already called this land home. Among the Wampanoag, one figure emerged as pivotal: Squanto, a man whose own journey was almost as extraordinary as the Pilgrim's voyage. Kidnapped as a young man and taken to Europe, Squanto had learned English and understood the ways of the Europeans, yet he returned to his homeland to find it forever changed. When he encountered the Pilgrims, he became their interpreter, teacher, and guide. With Squanto's help, they learned to plant corn, fish the rivers, and prepare for the unforgiving winters ahead. His knowledge bridged two worlds, the world the Pilgrims had left behind, and the world they were attempting to inhabit. Without him, the story of Plymouth Colony might have been one of disaster rather than endurance, a tale lost to the cold Atlantic waves. The alliance with the Wampanoag was not instantaneous, nor was it without tension. Trust had to be earned, agreements carefully negotiated, and cultural differences navigated with patience and respect. Massasoit, the leader of the Wampanoag tribe, recognized the Pilgrims' vulnerability and chose diplomacy over hostility. In return, the Pilgrims offered peace, shared skills, and mutual understanding, forging a fragile alliance that would shape the early years of Plymouth Colony. This relationship was remarkable not only for its practical benefits, but for its deeper significance. It was a meeting of worlds, a convergence of cultures, and a moment in history where cooperation became a matter of survival. The interactions between the Pilgrims and Native Americans were also rich with mystery and symbolism. The Wampanoag's teachings were practical, yet they carried a deeper wisdom. Corn was not merely a crop. It was a lifeline, a symbol of sustenance and continuity. Fishing in the rivers required more than skill. It demanded an understanding of the land and its rhythms, an intuition honed over generations. Hunting and gathering were not only for survival. They were connected to the spiritual beliefs and ceremonies of the Wampanoag, a subtle reminder to the Pilgrims that this land was alive, watched, and deeply understood. In these lessons, the Pilgrims glimpsed a world entirely different from the rigid structures of Europe, a world where humans were participants in a larger, interconnected web of life. One of the most enduring legacies of this interaction is a tradition that would later evolve into Thanksgiving. The first harvest celebration was more than a festive meal. It was a profound expression of gratitude, a recognition of the interdependence between the settlers and the indigenous people who had guided them. It symbolized hope and survival, but also the complex entanglement of cultures, the negotiation between gratitude and the unequal power dynamics that would shape future relations. It was a moment that combined history, ritual, and the quiet, almost mystical acknowledgement that the Pilgrims could not have survived without the knowledge and generosity of the Wampanoag. As the seasons passed, the Pilgrims began to settle, but they never forgot the lessons learned from their native allies. Squanto's teachings about planting, fishing, and trade became the foundation of Plymouth's survival strategy. The Wampanoag's knowledge of the land, the cycles of nature, and the delicate balance between taking and giving imbued the Pilgrims with a humility rarely captured in historical records. Every successful harvest, every winter endured, was a silent testament to the alliance that had made it possible. The mystery of these early interactions lies not only in the details of trade and survival, but in the intangible understanding that bridged two vastly different worlds. The presence of the Wampanoag also left a subtle but indelible mark on the identity of Plymouth Colony. Their language, customs, and ceremonies were woven into the fabric of daily life, and their guidance shaped the Pilgrims' perception of the land as a living entity, not merely a territory to conquer. Theirs was a knowledge built over centuries, a wisdom hidden in the forests, rivers, and hills that the newcomers could barely comprehend at first. It was a silent narrative, unfolding alongside the settlers' own story, influencing decisions, shaping survival, and leaving echoes that still resonate in the cultural memory of Massachusetts. Looking back, one realizes that the Pilgrim story is inseparable from the story of the Wampanoag. The legacy of Plymouth is not just a tale of European settlers arriving on a distant shore. It is a story of encounter, exchange, and survival in the face of the unknown. It is a story of courage, yes, but also of diplomacy, humility, and the subtle power of knowledge passed from one people to another. It invites us to reflect on the intricate relationships that define human history, to acknowledge that every moment of triumph carries with it the unseen contributions of others, and to recognize that the true wonder of Plymouth lies in the meeting of worlds, in the shared mysteries of a land that has witnessed countless generations, and in the enduring imprint of those first fragile steps toward understanding, survival, and community. The Pilgrims' arrival on the shores of Plymouth was only the beginning of a journey far more complex and grueling than the voyage across the Atlantic. The land, though filled with promise, was harsh and unforgiving. Winters arrived with icy winds that cut through clothing and bone alike. Rivers froze in silvered stillness, and snow blanketed the landscape in a silence that could feel both beautiful and menacing. The settlers, unaccustomed to such extremes, were immediately confronted with the full weight of survival in a land that held both bounty and peril. Their wooden shelters, hastily built from local timber, offered minimal protection from storms and frost, and the meager supplies they had brought with them dwindled faster than anticipated. Every day became a test of endurance, courage, and collective will. Illness quickly became one of the colony's greatest threats. The first winter took a devastating toll on the Pilgrims, claiming nearly half of their population. Fever, malnutrition, and exposure turned homes into makeshift infirmaries, and the cries of the sick echoed across the bleak, snow-covered fields. In these moments of despair, the settlers' faith and resolve were tested to the utmost. Yet even amidst suffering, a strange and subtle hope persisted. Survivors became caretakers, and communities that had been strangers only months before formed bonds forged in adversity. There was a quiet resilience that emerged, a determination to endure and to transform this untamed land into a home. In every struggle, there was a whispered sense of purpose, a feeling that their hardships were part of something larger, a story that would echo through generations. The challenges of survival extended far beyond illness. The land itself, though fertile, required knowledge the Pilgrims did not possess. Crops failed without understanding of local soil conditions, and unfamiliar seeds and planting cycles demanded patience and experimentation. The guidance of the Wampanoag people, particularly Squanto, was invaluable. Through him, the Pilgrims learned to plant corn in mounds, use fish as fertilizer, and manage water from rivers and streams effectively. Yet each successful harvest was a fragile triumph, vulnerable to storms, frost, and the uncertainties of nature. It was a daily reminder that life in the New World was unpredictable, and that mastery of this land would come only through observation, adaptation, and sheer perseverance. The struggle was not limited to physical survival. It extended to the very fabric of governance and community. The Mayflower Compact, signed aboard the ship before landing, was more than a piece of paper. It was a social experiment, a blueprint for self-governance in uncharted territory. The settlers had pledged mutual cooperation, justice, and accountability, establishing a system where each member of the colony had a role in shaping laws and maintaining order. In a place so remote and isolated, this compact became essential, a fragile framework holding the community together as they faced the unknown. Every decision, from rationing food to resolving disputes, carried weighty consequences, and the settlers' ability to collaborate became as critical as their ability to farm or hunt. Isolation also brought psychological challenges. The Pilgrims were acutely aware of the vastness of the land and the distance from a familiar world of Europe. The forests loomed like silent sentinels, concealing both sustenance and danger, while the coastline stretched endlessly, a reminder of the perilous ocean they had crossed and the worlds they had left behind. There was an element of mystery in every shadow, in every rustle of the trees, and in the shifting weather patterns. These men and women, so committed to reason and faith, had to contend with forces beyond their control, encountering a land that was alive with unseen rhythms and ancient presence. It was a world simultaneously beautiful, awe-inspiring, and indifferent to human struggle. Amid these trials, the Pilgrims cultivated a sense of community and resilience that would define the colony. Shared labor, collective meals, and joint religious observances became lifelines of both practical survival and psychological support. Each day, whether harvesting crops, repairing shelters, or attending to the sick, reinforced the fragile bonds that held the colony together. There was an unspoken understanding that survival depended not on individual heroism, but on cooperation, trust, and the willingness to endure hardships together. In this context, every small victory, a harvested field, a repaired roof, a healthy child, became monumental, a triumph against overwhelming odds. The early struggles of Plymouth Colony also carried subtle lessons about the land itself. Observing the seasons, the Pilgrims began to appreciate the intricate balance of nature, the ways in which animals, plants, and waterways interacted to sustain life. They learned to read the signs of weather, to anticipate storms, and to respect the cycles that govern both survival and prosperity. These lessons, gained through trial and error, became deeply ingrained in the colony's culture and identity, shaping its future and connecting the settlers to the land in ways that would resonate for generations. Ultimately, the early years of Plymouth Colony were a crucible of human endurance, faith, and adaptability. Every hardship, from frozen winters to food scarcity, tested the settlers' resolve. Every triumph, no matter how small, reinforced their hope and determination. The story of Plymouth is not merely one of survival. It is a story of courage under uncertainty, of the extraordinary human capacity to build life and community in the face of relentless adversity. It is a reminder that the founding of Plymouth was not a single moment of heroism, but a prolonged struggle, a dance with the unknown that combined history, mystery, and the indomitable will to endure. Centuries have passed since the Pilgrims first set foot on the shores of Plymouth, yet the legacy of their arrival endures in a way that continues to captivate imaginations around the world. At the heart of this legacy lies Plymouth Rock, a modest stone that has become far more than a geological formation. It is a symbol, a touchstone, and a silent witness to the unfolding story of a nation. Today, visitors from every corner of the globe stand before it, tracing their fingers over its weathered surface, imagining the footsteps of those early settlers, and pondering the mysteries that history leaves behind. Despite its size and simplicity, Plymouth Rock holds within it the weight of centuries, embodying ideals of courage, faith, and the enduring human quest for a new beginning. The rock itself, nestled near Plymouth's waterfront, has been carefully preserved and protected. Yet its presence continues to evoke wonder. Every crack and groove tells a story of human reverence and intervention, of generations who have sought to honor what they believe to be a foundational moment in American history. It has been moved, divided, and restored over the years, yet remains steadfast, as if the stone itself bears witness to the relentless passage of time. The act of preservation, while practical, also adds to the rock's aura of mystery. How many hands have touched it? How many silent prayers, hopes, or contemplations have been offered over it? The answer is unknowable, but it contributes to the rock's timeless quality, a bridge between past and present that invites reflection on the interplay between memory, legend, and history. Plymouth Rock is more than a tourist attraction. It is a cultural symbol that evokes the essence of human endurance. Visitors, often from distant lands, approach it with curiosity and reverence, seeking to connect with the courage of those early settlers who dare to confront the unknown. There is an almost cinematic quality to the scene. The waters of Plymouth Harbor glistening in the morning sun, seagulls tracing arcs through the sky, and the stone standing quietly, immovable, a monument to the aspirations of a people long gone but not forgotten. The rock serves as a portal, transporting observers across time and space, allowing them to imagine the perilous journey of the Mayflower, the landing on icy shores, and the uncertain first steps into an unfamiliar world. In this way, the rock continues to tell a story, not through words or documents, but through presence, atmosphere, and the shared human imagination. The symbolism of Plymouth Rock extends beyond its historical association with the Pilgrims. It embodies the idea of beginnings, of venturing into the unknown, and of forging identity in the face of uncertainty. Every year, countless school children, historians, and travelers stand before it, often reflecting on themes that transcend national boundaries: courage, resilience, adaptation, and hope. The Rock asks us to consider not only the historical events of 1620, but also the broader human impulse to explore, to migrate, and to build. In this sense, it becomes both a local landmark and a universal symbol, resonating with anyone who has sought to navigate the challenges of a new life or a new world. The surrounding landscape enhances the Rock's enduring presence. Plymouth's waterfront, with its gently rolling waves, historic docks, and reconstructed colonial buildings, creates a cinematic setting that transports visitors to a different era. The quiet rhythm of the harbor, punctuated by the distant calls of seabirds, evokes a sense of continuity between past and present. Standing before the Rock, one can almost hear the echo of the Pilgrims' footsteps mingling with the murmur of waves, a haunting reminder of the fragility and tenacity of human endeavor. This connection between environment and artifact heightens a rock's mystique, suggesting that history is not only recorded in books, but also embedded in place atmosphere and collective memory. Modern celebrations, reenactments, and commemorative events further reinforce Plymouth Rock's role as a living symbol. Each Thanksgiving season, the story of the Pilgrims' first harvest comes alive, blending history, ritual, and reflection. Tour guides recount tales of survival, interaction with the Wampanoag people, and the hardships endured by the settlers, allowing audiences to engage with history in a vivid, almost tangible way. The Rock itself, standing quietly amidst these celebrations, becomes a focal point, anchoring the narrative in a real, physical object that visitors can see and touch. It is at once ordinary and extraordinary, a simple stone transformed into a vessel of memory, identity, and inspiration. Yet Plymouth Rock also reminds us of the limits of certainty in history, the precise details of the Pilgrims' landing, the authenticity of the Rock as the exact point of first contact, and the myths surrounding it remain subject to debate and fascination. This tension between fact and legend imbues the site with an almost mystical quality. Visitors are invited to consider not only what happened, but also how stories are remembered, celebrated, and transformed over time. In this way, the Rock functions as a bridge between historical evidence and the imagination, a reminder that the past is always partly a mystery, open to interpretation, reflection, and wonder. Ultimately, Plymouth Rock endures because it embodies a human desire to honor beginnings, to remember courage, and to find continuity across centuries. It is a symbol of hope, resilience, and a pursuit of new opportunities, inviting reflection on the courage of those who dare to step into the unknown. Every gaze, every touch, every whispered story shared beside it reinforces its power and mystery, ensuring that the Rock will remain more than a geological feature. It will remain a timeless emblem of history, legend, and the enduring human spirit. For those who stand before it today, Plymouth Rock is not just a stone. It is a living connection to the past, a reminder of journeys undertaken, challenges overcome, and the quiet, enduring power of memory. Today, Plymouth Rock stands quietly, weathered yet steadfast, a monument not just to a landing, but to the spirit of hope, resilience, and daring that continues to inspire generations. Every crack, every shadow, and every step taken near the stone tells the story of humanity confronting the unknown. It reminds us that history is alive, not only in documents or textbooks, but in the places where courage and legend meet. Plymouth Rock is more than a symbol. It is a timeless invitation to imagine, reflect, and connect with the journeys that shape our world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to History Vault, your gateway to the past.